So what do you do if your tyre ends up like this? I actually made this go flat. This has nothing to do with dry steering. Well, if you have a car like this Volvo, it fails to come with a spare wheel. Instead you get something like this that you're supposed to put in your tyres, which is kind of a temporary measure, but no replacement for a spare. However, in my Seat, I actually paid a little bit extra. Little bit of product placement there, just put that on the roof. I have a spare wheel. Lovely. I always recommend you keep some gloves in your boot, particularly for jobs like this, but you want to take the floor of the boot out and move that somewhere safe. And normally you'll have some sort of screw where you can unscrew the spare wheel. Just unscrew that, move that to one side, and this actually has a subwoofer, something else I paid extra for. There's normally like a plug. This one has a little plug here. I'll just show you that plug. This one here. So you unplug that, and then you can take the subwoofer out. Put that to one side, and here you have your wheel. You have your wrench, which is very important. Your locking wheel nut key. If you can't find this, probably give up before you start. Most cars have that. And then something like this or this, which is used to take the caps off your wheel nuts if you have them. What I like to do is take the wrench and wrap it in duct tape around the end of it to stop you scratching your alloys. That's a top tip. Obviously, if you're out and you've got a flat tyre and you don't have any duct tape, you can't do this, but it's something you can do preemptively so that if you do get a flat tyre in the future, you're not going to scratch your alloys. Ta-da! So the first thing you need to do is take these nut covers off that cover your wheel bolts. You should call them bolt covers probably. And you use this little tool for this one. It's just like a pair of claws. You literally just pop it in, put your finger there and wiggle, and it comes out. I'll give you a better look at how that works. That's that there. This is the bolt cover, and literally just have these little tabs that fit either side of it. Put your finger in and pull out. So that's one done. This one's a bit harder. 2, 3. This one doesn't want to come. Give a good squeeze, good wiggle. There we go. 4 and 5. You'll notice that they're not all the same, because most of them have like the hex you get to go over a bolt, like this one, if you can see that. But one of them is a bigger circular one. Normally there's one slightly different one, or one that's missing, and that's for your locking wheel bolt. The eagle-eyed viewers among you have noticed that the tyre now has air, and that's because I had to fill it up with air to move the car, because this sunny day, as beautiful as it is making it very hard to film with these long shadows. The next step though, locking wheel nut. This is a locking wheel nut key, and you use it to loosen up your locking bolt. It has a little pattern inside of it, matches up with the bolt, and this stops people from stealing your wheels. It has actually solved a problem, because wheel theft used to be a much bigger problem than it is now, but having these fitted to your car makes it much harder for people to steal them. You can see the different bolt types in there, your normal hex type, and then your locking wheel bolt, which has the same pattern as this key, which is why if I put the key in and twist it, eventually it will fall in. There we go, that's locked in now, and then you can use the wrench to loosen it. Anti-clockwise is to go loose, clockwise is to go tight. I think they say lefty loosey or righty tighty, but that doesn't make sense to me, because this is right, but then if I put my spanner down or my wrench down, right is now loosening it. So I just prefer to remember anti-clockwise to undo and clockwise to do up. What you want to remember though is you want the locking wheel nut to be the first off but the last on, because you don't want to be putting too much strain on this, because obviously this key is not as strong as these hex bolts. Make sure before you do this job that your car is on hard surface. Don't do it on mud or grass. That's not safe. It's not going to work. You're going to land yourself in some trouble. Also, do not lift the car until you have loosened the bolts, because when the car is lifted with the little jack that we have, it's not that stable. You don't want to be putting a load of force on your wheels when it's lifted on the little scissor jack. Anyway, this is what you do. Put the, oopsie daisies, just kicked my wheel caps, move them out of the way. Put your locking wheel nut key on, have it pointing to the left, and then stand on it to loosen it. And do that now for all of the bolts. Don't go around in a circle, do the opposite ones, it's better. It doesn't matter too much, but it's just better to do it that way, especially when you're tightening them. You see why you don't want to lift the car before you do this. That's 2 done, 3 more to go. I've just loosened all 5 bolts. You don't want to unwind them at all, just literally loosen them so that they're easy to turn. Probably half a turn off is all you need. Next step now is to lift the car. So this is how you do that. Something I didn't show you earlier was the jack, and that is this thing here. And you use this to help you wind it up. How this works is quite simple. You have the flat bit, which is the base, and you have like a groove. I'll show you where that groove goes soon. And then you have the handle to wind it, and this little hole here to put the winder in. Winder in, again clockwise for up, anti-clockwise for down. Let me show you. The flat base goes on the ground, and this little grooved bit goes under the car on a part I'll show you in a second. But what you want to do first, just twist it by hand to get it to roughly the right height so that you can slot the groove bit into place. So if you remember the little groove on the top of the jack, well, underneath the car you have this piece of metal. You want that metal to go inside the groove. I'll show you where that piece of metal is. So if I come out, you can obviously recognise the side of the car with the wheel. Go down, just behind the wheel, look up, and you should be able to see that metal groove there. Then you want to lift the jack, so that piece of metal, it's not actually a groove, it's a bit of metal that's sticking out, but the bit of metal sticking out wants to go into the groove of the jack. I think I've got it about there. I'm looking at the camera screen at the moment, it's very hard, so I will double check that with my eyes, but that's really what you want. The bit of metal in the groove, the base of the jack on the ground, and then it's a case of twisting this to make the car go higher. I'll just check that with my own eyes now to make sure it's well seated. That looks pretty damn good actually. Then you put this little hook in the hole. There are various different types, but they're all roughly similar. You have a flat base with like a groove where the bit of metal goes in between. All cars I've had something like that if they've had the spare wheel. So hook goes in the hole, and then you literally clockwise go up. Make sure your handbrake is on. If you're doing the front wheels, make sure it's in gear or in park. If you're doing the rear wheels, the handbrake only stops the rear wheels, and in a front wheel drive car, putting it in gear will keep your front wheels from moving. If you've got a rear wheel drive car and you want to do the rear wheels, there's no way of keeping the front wheels from spinning or stopping them from spinning. What you'd have to do is get your wrench and do that, which is not ideal. That will stop your wheel from turning. It's not ideal because you need your wrench to undo the bolts. So find like a big bit of wood or something that you can wedge, or a brick, or just something like a big rock that you can put underneath your tyre to stop it rolling whichever way you think it's going to roll. So twist. These are always awkward. They're never very elegant to use. And gradually the car goes up. I do actually have a proper jack, but I'm doing this for the purposes of this video. That clicking you can hear, if you can hear that clicking on the camera, don't worry about that clicking. That is just the handbrake as the car moves a little bit as I lift it. That will happen. Don't worry about it. You want the wheel to get about 1 centimetre off the ground. Stick at this, and I'll come back to you when I've done that. Gets easier as it gets higher because you've actually got clearance, so your knuckles don't hit the ground as you're turning it. Got about 1 centimetre underneath there now, so I'll just do it a little bit more so I can unhook this and put it to one side. Now that the car is lifted, it's time to unscrew your wheel bolts. First, the locking wheel bolt. I can actually do it by hand because I've already loosened them. There you go, that comes out. Put that just under the car so I don't kick it again. Oh, no, don't want that for that one. Now I need the wrench to unscrew all of the hex bolts. Be back in a sec. So now I've taken out all of the wheel bolts. It's just a case of taking the wheel off the car. This one's already loose. I can feel it's loose. That's great. It's going to be quite easy to get off. But that's not always the case. If it's loose, just put your hands either side and lift it off. If it is stuck, then you're going to have to kick it. Don't get under the car and kick it, obviously. That could get you hurt. But literally, just kicking the bottom of it like that will make it come off. I barely touched it at all there, but if it was on hard, I'll give it a good kick, and normally the front will come down like that and I can catch it. Now obviously don't kick it so hard that the car's going to be unstable and possibly fall off of the jack. If it looks like it's moving and it looks precarious, give up. It's not worth damaging your car or getting yourself hurt. Just call a breakdown service out to help you. But normally it's stable enough for you to give it a kick hard enough to get it off. Now you just take the wheel off, wheel it to one side and get the spare. Another tip is to slide the wheel underneath the car so that the sill of the car, which the sill is this part, the hard part, is over the wheel. Try not to put it under a brake line or under the fuel tank, so if the car just does fall, you've got a bit of extra safety there, as the car will fall on the wheel and not on you. So I've got the Space Saver spare out of the boot. As you can see, it really is a Space Saver. It's very narrow, bit of a joke really, but it will get you out of trouble until you can get your tyre fixed. Offer it up to your wheel hub. Try and find the holes where your bolts go into, and obviously line them up with the holes on your wheel. And then literally put on and twist until the holes are lined up. What I find helpful is to put my foot at the bottom of the wheel and one hand at the top, and then get your bolts and just loosely wind them in. Don't wind them in all the way to begin with, you're just trying to support the wheel. Once you've got two on, it gives you a bit of extra support. You can give it a little bit of wiggle to help it get on. If it's hard to twist the bolt, wiggle the wheel a little bit and that should make it easier to twist the bolt. Once all the bolts are on, make sure that they're hand tight. Then make sure that they're wrench tight, and you'll find that the wheel will move as I turn it, like so. Then hold the wheel and give it a bit of a push. You don't have to make it too tight, and do opposite. So I've done this one, now I'm going to go the opposite to that one. Just make that tight with the wrench. Opposite is now this one. And then this one up here, which then leaves me with the locking wheel nut. Once they're hand tight, lower the car. Now's the ideal time to show you the locking wheel nut. As you can see, your normal hex nuts are like this, and your locking wheel nut has that pattern. This has the same pattern inside it, and that's how that works. So you put your wrench on the end of that to turn your locking wheel nut. Now the wheel is on and the nuts are tightened with the wrench, but not fully tightened. Obviously, don't forget to move the wheel from underneath the car if you put the wheel underneath the car for extra safety. And then it's just a case of winding down the scissor. I do hate these things. Anti-clockwise for down. Make sure there's nothing underneath the car, nothing underneath the wheel, everything's clear there, that'll be fine. And just anti-clockwise for it to come down. It should be easier to get down than to get up. Try not to hurt your hand by scraping it on the floor like that when you start going fast. I've done that so many times. It's not worth going quickly, just do it slowly, otherwise you end up with bloody knuckles even if you've got the gloves on. Okay, it's starting to get loose now. So now I can pull the scissor jack from underneath the car, and it's much quicker just to by hand wind it all the way down so you can fit it back in its rightful place in the boot. The next step is to tighten your wheel bolts properly. Normally I would use a torque wrench to get it to the right torque. On this car is 120 Newton meters, but you're out at the side of the road with a flat tyre and all you have is this. So you're not going to use a torque wrench, you're going to have to use your body weight. It's worth mentioning that space saver spare wheels don't permit you to go as fast as a full-size wheel. For example, this one is limited to 50 miles an hour and the speed limit in the UK is 70, so if I had this on I wouldn't be able to go more than 50, and I would get it sorted as soon as I could. I wouldn't leave this on for a long period of time. I don't think that's the safest thing to do. And if you're wondering why it says 80 down here and 50 up here, that's because that's kilometers an hour and that's miles an hour. This is how you use your body weight to tighten the wheels. Remember, you want to tighten the locking wheel nut last. Put the wrench on so it's pointing towards the right and stand on it. And just use your body weight to make it tight. I weigh about 65 kilos and that gives me just about the right amount of force with a little bit of doing this. For example, like that. This should only be a temporary measure. I've now tightened all 5 bolts using my body weight. If you're practicing without an instructor, make sure you have insurance. Get £20 off via the link in the description to Collingwood, who provides specialist learner insurance that allows you to practice in a friend or family member's car without risking their no claims bonus. If you want to insure your own car, click on the link to confused.com. I have found that they have the widest selection of cheap insurers for young drivers. Now it's just a case of putting all your stuff in the boot and you can be on your merry way. If you think the video is helpful, give it a like and subscribe to get my future videos. I'm Richard, this is Conquer Driving, and until the next one, cheerio.